Hobbyist T-shirt. I'm Dan. I'm going to be with you for the next little bit. Today we are talking deck tech, as I had promised. Skullbriar, the Walking Grave, is our commander, and we're going to go through all the cards, and I've got a few open slots that I'd like your suggestions for at the end. So we'll not waste any time, get right to it. Skullbriar, the Walking Grave, is a green and a black for a 1/1 legendary creature. He's a zombie elemental. He has haste, and when Skullbriar, the Walking Grave, deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on it. And it has this little bonus of counters remain on Skullbriar as it moves to any zone other than player's hand or library. I chose this because of the new tuck rule. You cannot get rid of those counters anymore. If he's going to bounce to my hand or go into my library, I can choose to put him back in the command zone and keep those counters on him. And he's got haste, and that's very important because he can just sit in your command zone once he's got a few counters on him, sit in there and be a potential one-shot. This could make me a target. It could also win me games, and we'll see how this goes. So as usual, I've divided up the rest of the deck into a series of packages. So today I've got a removal package, ramp, graveyard recursion, card draw, tutoring, and then all of the utility, the things that will actually be killing people. So we'll start off with removal. And we'll start with everybody's favorite green removal spell, Beast Within. 2 and a green, destroy target permanent at instant speed, and its controller puts a 3/3 beast creature token onto the battlefield. Usually that beast ends up getting sacrificed to something else, so giving someone a token is not that big of a deal. Next up, we got a pair of creature removal spells in Doomblade and Ultimate Price. One says destroy target non-black creature for 1 and a black, and the other says destroy target monocolored creature for 1 and a black. And those are both instants good for dealing with Prophet of Krufix, for Maelstrom Wanderer, so they don't get haste. They enter their attack step. You pop their Wanderer, all their creatures lose haste. Next up, I've got there's also Murderous Cut, which is similar, destroys a creature, but for 1 black and 4 delve mana. So hopefully, I'm rarely going to be paying 5 for this. Ideally, I want to only pay 1 and destroy target creature, again at instant speed. Next, I've got a sorcery removal spell, and this is just kind of a pet card for me. It's not necessarily in here because it's powerful, but I like it. It's Guild. It's 3 and a black to exile target creature. Put a colorless artifact token named Gold onto the battlefield that has sacrificed this artifact. Add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So you get a nice little artifact ramp there, as well as getting rid of something problematic. Some good targets are things that are indestructible, things that, in general, you just don't want to see in the game again. Still useful for hitting commanders, but not as with this new tuck rule. Next up, we got Curse of Death's Hold, and this is aimed at Rug players, specifically for Avenger of Zendikar plant tokens. This is 3 and 2 black for an enchantment that's an aura curse. So you enchant a player, and creatures enchanted players controls get -1/-1. So when all of their Avenger plant tokens enter the battlefield as 0/1s, they actually enter as -1/-0s and immediately die and cannot be pumped by playing a land, and then they don't get all the juicy benefits of being able to Crater Hoof and kill people. Next up, we've got Sudden Spoiling. This is 1 and 2 black for an instant that has Split Second. Creatures target player controls become 0/2 and lose all abilities until end of turn. Now, what this means is A, people can't respond to it, and B, having them lose all their abilities is very important, and the fact that they can't respond to it is also very important. I do have to bear in mind that creatures with counters on them still keep the power and toughness from the counters, but potentially this could be game-saving when you're getting swung in by a bunch of goblins that have all been pumped up by what other effects, then they become 0/2s, and you are still alive. Next up, we got the old classic Acidic Slime. I'm taking my own advice here and making sure to include a copy of this guy in my deck. If I'm playing green, he's going to be in every deck. He's just super useful. He's a 3 and 2 green for a creature ooze with Death Touch, who's a 2/2. But the most important part is when he enters the battlefield, destroy target artifact, enchantment, or land. So that's important for getting rid of Maze of Ith, Mystifying Maze, Maze of Shadows. There's all kinds of mazes. It's good for hitting people's, I don't know, like a Cabal Coffers or a Nykthos if they're ramping like crazy. It's so useful, so useful. Next up, we've got Gari Charm. This is from Return to Ravnica. This is a black and a green for an instant that you get to choose one. All creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn. Good for those tokens, as I was saying before. Or destroy target enchantment. Good for Rhystic Study. Get rid of that thing. Or regenerate each creature you control. So being able to keep your Skullbriar on the battlefield as opposed to having him go to the command zone, having to recast him again, that can be super useful. Generally, I'm probably going to be popping enchantments, things like Humility, things like there's an enchantment that says players can only attack left or right, and that person gets to pick on their upkeep which direction it goes. You want to be able to swing at whoever you want to swing at with Skullbriar. So in the same vein, Croson Grip, 2 and a green, has split second for an instant, destroy target artifact or enchantment. Absolutely 100% one of the most useful enchantment kill spells. There was a game where I rabbit holed my last draw, or the draw I would have had the game not ended, and this is what I would have drawn, and it would have saved me because I would have gotten to kill a Basalt Monolith in response to Power Artifact. Unfortunately, it was still on top of my deck. Next up, I've got a Sweeper, but this Sweeper also doubles as a card draw spell. It's Decree of Pain for 6, a black and a black, so 8 mana total. That's a lot, but it's worth it. It's a sorcery that destroys all creatures that can't be regenerated, and draw a card for each creature that's destroyed this way. Or you can cycle it, paying 3 and 2 black. When you cycle Decree of Pain, all creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. And since our Skullbriar is going to be getting big, and nice and big, that can potentially clear the way of a player's, they got a weenie board or a bunch of elves or something like that, then potentially that -2/-2, and you get to draw a card from the cycle. That can be definitely useful. And lastly, for removal is actually a creature. It's called Silklash Spider. For 3 and 2 green, you get a 2/7 with reach, and it has an ability of X green. Silklash Spider deals X damage to each creature with flying. So that's in response to the new block, Dragons of Tarkir. A lot of flyers roaming around. If you can get up to a bunch of mana, well, at least, first of all, you have a 2/7 reach blocker. That's definitely relevant. They may just steer away from you for a turn or two because you have a blocker and somebody else doesn't. And then once you have enough mana, you can just wipe the board of all them dragons. Potentially really good. So we'll move on to the ramp package. Some of my favorite cards are ramp spells. I've only got 2 artifact rampers, and that's Soul Ring, as usual, and Grim Monolith. Then we've got a Sylvan Caryatid, or Sylvan Caryatid. I'm not so sure if he's right for the deck, but I do like the card, and I do have a couple copies, and having a hexproof creature can definitely be good. He also survives to your cycled Decree of Pain, as he's a 0/3. Next up, we've got Courser of Krufix. It's not really ramp, but having card selection is definitely, or card advantage, I should say, being able to play those lands off the top of your deck and get to the next card. If you've seen or played any standard, you know how good that can be. Next up, we've got Explosive Vegetation. This is a reprint that's in Dragons of Tarkir. I really like the art. It's It's kind of neat art. But you search for 2 basic land cards and put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library, and that's a sorcery for 3 and a green. Getting those first few lands isn't that hard in the deck. Getting to 4 mana isn't too tough. So getting to ramp 2 more and getting yourself to to 6 mana can be quite important if you've used Skullbriar a couple times. Maybe he costs 6 by that point in the game. Next up, we got Frontier Siege. This is another newer card. This is from Fate Reforged. It's 3 and a green for an enchantment that says choose Khans or Dragons. At the beginning of each of your main phases, you can add 2 green to your mana pool if you chose Khans. And if you choose Dragons, whenever a creature with flying enters the battlefield under your control, you may have it fight target creature you don't control. So we're not going to be using Dragons all that often. This is mostly just going to be a ramp card. You can pay your 4 on your first main phase, and then on your second main phase, you get another 2, and maybe use that mana for something else. Next up, we've got Bear Umbra. I call this a ramp card because this deck is going to be attacking. That is, the goal of the deck is to cast Skullbriar and attack with it as often as possible. So giving your Skullbriar a Bear Umbra is definitely potent, as Bear Umbra is 2 and 2 green for an enchantment aura, enchants a creature. And whenever this creature attacks, untap all lands you control, and it also gets +2/+2 and totem armor. So if you've never used totem armor, it just says if something would destroy this creature, destroy this aura instead. And the last card in my ramp package is another favorite of mine. It's Seed Guide Ash. For 4 and a green, you get a 4/4 Treefolk Druid that when Seed Guide Ash dies, you may search your library for up to 3 forests and put them into play tapped. So going from 5 to 8 may seem like a bit of overkill, but he combos really nicely with some other cards in the deck, and when we get to that, I will definitely let you know. So next up, we're going to look at our Recursion Package. So getting cards back from your graveyard can be quite important, and I've only got two in here. The old classic Eternal Witness. It's 1 and 2 green for a 2/1 that when it enters the battlefield, return target creature from your graveyard to your hand. And then the new Maternal Witness, or Den Protector, from Dragons of Tarkir. It's 1 and a green for a 2/1 that has Morph. Creatures with power less than Den Protector's power can't block it. Not terribly relevant, but it has a Megamorph for 1 and a green, and when you turn it face up, return target card from your graveyard to your hand. Now, it's not creature, it's not land, it's target card, just like Eternal Witness, thus the name. And it's Maternal Witness because it's a lady fighting with a baby on her hip. It's kind of cool. So Eternal Witness is 3 mana, Maternal Witness is 5 mana, essentially, but you get a 3/2 out of it instead of a 2/1, and anything with 2 power can't block it. Could be relevant, but I like the card. I think it's really fun. Next, we'll go to our card draw package. We have the old standby, Sensei's Divining Top. Technically not always a card draw spell, but it does draw you 1 card. Generally, you're going to be using its first ability. So it's 1 mana artifact that has pay 1, look at the top 3 cards of your library, and put them back in any order. That comes in handy with one of the miracles that's in the deck, and we'll get to that. Next up, we've got Bitter Revelation. This is a Khans of Tarkir card for 3 and a black. It's a sorcery. Look at the top 4 cards of your library, put 2 of them in your hand, and the rest into your graveyard. You lose 2 life. So this is a card selection card that actually nets you 2 cards as well and can help put some stuff in the graveyard, and you can kind of treat those as an extension of your hand with certain things like the Witnesses. Next up, we got Hunter's Prowess. This is 4 and a green for a sorcery that says until end of turn, target creature gets +3/+3 and trample. And whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw that many cards. Now, you can live the dream of hitting someone with like an 11/11 Skullbriar and potentially knocking them out of the game and then drawing 11 cards to help continue to knock other players out of the game. Next up, we've got Death Reap Ritual. This is 2, a black and a green for an enchantment that says Morbid. At the beginning of each end step, if a creature died this turn, you may draw a card. So this comes in handy with all those kill spells that we've got, the Doom Blades and the Ultimate Prices and the Murderous Cuts. Think creatures die in this format. So as long as a creature died on any turn on the end step, you get to draw a card. Next up, we got good old Sign in Blood. 2 black. Draw 2 cards, lose 2 life, and you can target it at other people should they be at 2 or less. A little trick that I really like to use whenever possible, but in general, it's going to be pay 2 life, draw 2 cards, spend 2 black. Next up, we've got Disciple of Bolas. He's 3 and a black. When Disciple of Bolas enters the battlefield, sacrifice another creature. You gain X life and draw X cards, where X is that creature's power. So again, this is another Living the Dream card, because let's say you've got your Skullbriar up to 12/12. Well, you can cast Disciple, sack your 12/12, gain 12 life, draw 12 cards, and then cast Skullbriar again and swing at someone else on the next turn because he has haste. And the last of the card draw spells I've got here is Greater Good. If you don't know this one, this is it's a green creature deck staple. It's 2 and 2 green for an enchantment that says sacrifice a creature, draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power, then discard 3. So that Treefolk Shaman I was talking about earlier, the one that nets you 3 forests, Seed Guide Ash. So when you sack him to Greater Good, you go get 3 forests, then you draw 4 cards and discard 3 of them. So next up, we've got a tutor package. Now, I'm not one to usually play tutors because I find they cheapen the game. They don't play into the spirit of the format. I, in general, disagree with running this many tutors, but because this is my rug deck Silver Bullet, I hope it might not even work. But because this Skullbriar will be attacking the rug player first, I want to even the playing field a little bit. So I've included some tutors, some classics like Demonic Tutor, 1 and a black, sorcery speed, search for a card, put it in your hand. Vampiric Tutor, a single black, instant speed, pay 2 life, and put that search for a card, put it on top of your library. So that's your end step tutor. Runescarred Demon, 6/6 flying for 5 and 2 black. And when he enters the battlefield, search your library for a card and put it in your hand. This one's kind of interesting. It's called Praetor's Grasp. It's not really a tutor for me, but a tutor against someone else. It's for 1 and 2 black at sorcery speed. Search target opponent's library for a card and exile it face down. Then that player shuffles his or her library. You may look at and play that card for as long as it remains exiled. So you can use this to do a couple things. First of all, you can use it to go get something from someone who's playing green or black. Maybe grab someone's Soul Ring if it's early enough in the game and play their Soul Ring. Or you can just use this as like a surgical extraction tool. If you know the combo that you're playing against, well, you just Praetor's Grasp them, search their deck, and take a piece of it out. And leave it exiled for the rest of the game. It's exiled face down. They don't get to know that their combo is not in their deck anymore until they search their library and go for it. Or if they're looking for a land, they can be like, what did he take? If they know their deck well enough, well, they can probably figure it out. So super handy card. You can go take away the Crater Hoof. You can go take away the Power Artifact. Go take out Exquisite Blood, Kiki Jiki, all kinds of stuff to go get. Next up, we've got Green Sun Zenith. Searches for a green creature. There's a few of them in the deck. If you got something in the graveyard you need to get back, well, you Green Sun for Eternal Witness, and then get that thing back. Court of Calling. This is an X spell for X and 3 green with Convoke, so you can tap green creatures instead of paying green. And search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost X or less and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. What's nice about that is you don't have to pay for the tutor and then pay the mana cost to put it on the battlefield. If you can manage to do it all at once because you've got 3 green creatures, then you're in Value Town and you're ahead. And lastly, in the tutor package, we've got Cdc Undead Vizier. This is a brand new card. It's 3 and 2 black for a legendary creature Zombie Naga, who's a 4/6 with Death Touch. So that's already a lot of text. But he also has Exploit. When this creature enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice a creature. When Cdc Undead Vizier exploits a creature, you may Demonic Tutor. Search your library for anything, put it in your hand. So, last package here I'm going to talk about is really the ways that we're going to use Skullbriar to actually kill people. So, what are some of his limitations? Well, he's a ground creature. He doesn't have flying. He doesn't have any form of evasion on his own, so we need to give him some. So one way to do that is to give him Trample. And the most obvious way to give a creature Trample is by using Rancor. Now, Rancor is 1 green for an aura enchant creature. The creature gets +2/+0 and Trample. And the little bonus of when Rancor is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, return Rancor to its owner's hand. So you can keep assembling Skullbriar with Rancor each time they kill Skullbriar. As long as they don't kill Skullbriar in response to Rancor on the stack, then you're going to get it back. Next way to pump our old Walking Grave is Blessings of Nature, and this is where the Sensei's Divining Top comes in, because this is 4 and a green to distribute 4 +1/+1 counters among any number of target creatures. And it has a miracle for 1 green. So you can set this up with your top and draw it as your first card, or you can draw it on someone else's turn and miracle it for 1 green and put 4 counters on Skullbriar as long as he's on the battlefield. And those counters will never go away. As long as that resolves, you got 4 more counters on him, and that's more power to swing with. So next up we got Forgotten Ancient. This guy's fun because he's 3 and a green, and he's a 0/3, but whenever a player casts a spell, any spell, you may put a +1/+1 counter on Forgotten Ancient. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may move any number of counters from Forgotten Ancient to other creatures. You can put them anywhere, but you're going to be putting them on your Skullbriar because that's where they go. They go on there, and then they never go away again. Got Rune Chanter Spike. This is an equipment that you may remember from Standard Days Gone By. It's 2 mana for an equipment that equips for 2, and it says equipped creature has first strike and gets +X/+0, where X is the number of instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard. So in general, you're probably going to get +3 to +4, but you could get more if the game's gone on long enough. I just find it makes things a little bit scary for people, makes them really pay attention. Because this is a deck about attacking, I've included this next card, Beastmaster Ascension. It's 2 and a green for an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control attacks, put a quest counter on Beastmaster Ascension, and as long as it has 7 or more counters, creatures you control get +5/+5. I don't know if this is the right deck for that card, but it's certainly a deck that wants to attack, that wants to continue attacking. So if you can put this down and start putting counters on it and get it up to 7, then your dudes are just bigger. And if people want to spend a removal spell on it, that's perfectly fine too. So next up, we got another fairly new card from Khans. It's called Become Immense. It's another Delve spell. So for 5 and a green, also known as 5 cards in your graveyard exiled, and a green, target creature gets +6/+6 until end of turn. So it's a one-shot, but going from 15 to 21 on a Skullbriar, that can get things done. Next up, we've got Hardened Scales. This is 1 mana. Whenever it's a 1 mana enchantment, if one or more +1/+1 counters would be placed on a creature you control, like Skullbriar, you may put one more on instead, or that many +1 instead. So Skullbriar's attack. You play Hardened Scales turn 1. Ideally, you want this in your opening hand. You play it turn 1. You play Skullbriar turn 2. You attack, and instead of putting 1 counter on him, you put 2. And every time he hits, you get another counter. You get the idea? Excellent. Next up, we've got, goes really well with that. What you would think would go in this deck is Doubling Season. 4 and a green, whenever you would put a token onto the battlefield, put twice that many instead. Or whenever you would put a counter on a permanent, you put twice that many instead. In other words, Hardened Scales says, oh, you put 1 more? No, you put 2 more. And your replacement effects start doubling and things start getting crazy. Now, Skullbriar, instead of getting 1 counter every time he hits, he gets 4. Seems good to me. Next up, I got Liliana of the Veil. She's kind of removal, but she's also creature control, kind of card hand control. She's just a really good planeswalker. I wanted to try her out. I don't think I've played her enough. Next, we've got Herald of Torment. This is from Theros block. It's 1 black for an enchantment creature who has Bestow for 3 black. And he gives, or has, or both. He's got flying, and he's a 3/3, so he enchants a creature and gives it +3/+3. And all of that for the low cost of 1 life during your upkeep. So I think it's good. Picks up Skullbriar, makes him a bit beefier, and you lose 1 life on your upkeep. And when Skullbriar dies, because you know he will, because you're going to be a target, then at least he lands on the battlefield, gives you another flying blocker. Next, we got Grave Titan. This is just in here for value. Just gives you creatures, gives you blockers. He's 4 and 2 black for a giant who's 6/6 with Death Touch. And whenever he enters the battlefield or attacks, put 2/2 black zombies onto the battlefield. Next up, we got Lightning Greaves. This is just to protect your Skullbriar. 2 mana for an equipment. It equips for 0, which is the best part about the Greaves, and gives the creature haste and shroud. Now, that's tricky because now you can't target Skullbriar for certain things that you want to do, but once he starts getting big enough, it may be just important to make sure nobody can target him. Next up, we've got Gerard Golgari Lichlord. This guy could be a contender for commander of the deck, but I chose to go with Skullbriar. Jared is 2 black and 2 green for a zombie elf who's legendary. He's a 2/2. He gets +1/+1 for each creature in your graveyard, and sacrifice another creature. Each opponent loses life equal to the sacrificed creature's power. So this can be good once your Skullbriar is nice and big. You can put this guy out, sack your Skullbriar. Everybody loses a bunch of life. And Jared also has sacrifice a swamp and a forest. Return Jared from your graveyard to your hand. Probably not going to be using that a whole lot. Next up, we got Vidalcan Orrery, because Skullbriar with Flash is just as dangerous, but also some of these other spells, like your tutors, your sorcery tutors having Flash can be extremely good. Same with Yeva, Nature's Herald, giving all your green creatures Flash. Absolutely awesome when you've got green creatures such as these ones. We've got Nylea, God of the Hunt. It's 3 and a green, so 4 mana for a 6/6 god. She gives other creatures you control trample. She is also a mana sink because you can pay 3 and a green, and target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. So she's definitely juicy, and if you can flash her out, I mean, we're talking Magical Christmas Land, but if you can flash her out and pump your Skullbriar in the same turn while you're attacking somebody, and they went to chump block your Skullbriar with a 1/1, and you were going to hit with a 12/12, well, now maybe you hit with a 14/14 trample. Next up, we got Vulturous Zombie. I just like this card. It's 3, a black and a green for a plant zombie who starts as 3/3. So that's a plant that starts as a 3/3. But it also has flying, which is crazy. And whenever a card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, put a +1/+1 counter on Vulturous Zombie. So for black and green, the one card I can't think of, and I haven't figured out a way to search for it, is just a way to move counters from one creature to another. There's Bioshift, but that has blue in it. There's a couple cons cards, but they all have white in it. So I want one that's just black and green that moves counters from one creature to another creature so that I can get a bunch of counters on the Vulturous Zombie and move them to Skullbriar. Next up, we got Creekwood Liege. This is the black-green Liege for 1 and then 3 hybrid mana, black-green hybrid mana. So 4 total. You get a 2/2 horror that says other black creatures you control get +1/+1, and other green creatures also get +1/+1, making your Skullbriar +2/+2. And it also has, at the beginning of your upkeep, put a 1/1 black and green worm creature into play, and that's a token. Next up, we got Farika, God of Affliction. It's a 3-mana god. She's kind of in here for value as well. It also deals with problem cards that can show up, such as Eldrazi hitting a graveyard. So if someone manages to kill an Eldrazi for a green and a black at instant speed ability, you can use Farika to exile it. They still shuffle their graveyard in, but their Eldrazi is now gone because in response to the shuffle trigger, you exile their Eldrazi. They can't get it back again. For all that trouble, they get a 1/1 black and green snake with Death Touch. But you can also use this on your own, and you can have the snakes. Maybe that works out for you. The last creature I have in here, again, just for value, Rakshasa Death Dealer, black and a green for a 2/2 cat demon that has pay black and a green to pump it +2/+2, and black and a green to regenerate it. It's just a mana sink. If you think you can get in with one creature and Skullbriar is stuck in your command zone with too many command zone counters on it, but you've already got the Death Dealer out, well, you can swing and pump and maybe get rid of a player. The last card I've got in here is Ye Olde Sword of Fire and Ice, because Rug plays red, Rug plays blue. Now you have pro red and pro blue. And when this creature deals combat damage to a player, deal 2 damage and draw a card. It's just a good card. So that, along with 36 lands, if you're counting, you're kind of wasting your time, because I will tell you there are 6 open slots in this deck. And where I want your help is with all those tutors and all those pump spells and all those ways to gain advantage drawing cards. I need 6 silver bullet cards. I like that phrase today. I need 6 cards to go into this deck that will just put it over the top. Now I've got some cards in there for now. They're definitely not the strongest. One that's the closest to just staying in the deck is Champion of Lambholt. So she's 1 and 2 green for a 1/1 creature. And it says creatures with power less than Champion of Lambholt's power can't block creatures you control. So potentially making Skullbriar unblockable if you can get her big enough, because you put counters on her by playing more creatures. So I don't know if she's good enough to stay in the deck. We'll have to see. But other than her, there's 5 other slots. Including her, there's 6 slots. If you have ideas, if you think you know just the perfect card to go in here, let me know. All the other cards, they're what I want to play. So as far as choosing the correct cards to go into this deck, I'm not interested in what's correct. I want to know fun. Now, maybe I'm contradicting myself because I'm saying this is my kill the rug player deck. But I don't believe that in this format there is such thing as correct cards. Now, there could be cards that are correct for my purposes of trying to kill the guy playing Maelstrom Wanderer, trying to kill the guy playing Riku, or Animar. Is it Animar right? Yeah. But these are the cards that I picked. Now, I've left some open slots for your suggestions. I'd love to hear them. You can join the Luckiest T-Shirt Facebook group and post your suggestions on there. Or if you see this post on there, the post for this podcast, then you can check that out. And let me know. What do you think? All right. So that's my Skullbriar, the Walking Grave, minus a couple cards. If you think I'm pretty sure I've got the lands that I want. I've got my duels. I've got my Maze of Ith. I've got my Rogue's Passage to make things unblockable. Cavern of Souls just for fun. Homeward Path in case someone steals them. So don't worry too much about lands, but 6 cards, and if you know of one that can move counters from one creature to another creature in green and black, that's the one I'm looking for. And any other ideas, let me know. Maybe there's a Planeswalker I don't know about that is perfect for this deck, or an equipment that is perfect for this deck. All right? So hit me up, Luckiest T-Shirt on Facebook, or The Luckiest T-Shirt. You can search for the group there. Maybe there's a link coming up on the screen for you YouTubers. I know you guys like deck techs on Reddit, and I experienced my first troll on Reddit the other day. And to that gentleman, if he happens to be listening to this and recognizes my voice and still thinks this video is horrible or this podcast is horrible, I would just like to say that you're a bully and fuck you. I think that's pretty fair to say. It's a casual format. There's no such thing as the correct card. There might be cards better suited to accomplish a goal, but there's no such thing as correct. Unless you're playing 1v1 competitive French Commander, there's no such thing as a correct or incorrect card. I could run 98 Forests, a Sword of Fire and Ice, and a Skullbriar the Walking Grave. There is nothing incorrect about that deck. Sure, it may not be the most effective, but there is nothing incorrect about it because it's what I want to do. It's how I want to play. All right? So, everybody else, thank you for listening. That one guy, go fuck yourself. And have fun with it.